So this is Joyakgol. He's visiting from Jeju Island right now. He is somebody who's been deeply involved in anarchist activism in Korea over the last 15 years, and who happens to have a amazing, tremendous knowledge of the history of anarchism in Korea beginning in the late 19th century. And so he's here to tell us about that history, as well as and how it's evolved, as well as some of his own work. He's been involved in so many different projects: anti-urban redevelopment, anti-militarism, anarcha-feminist projects, a whole bunch of other things. So we're really happy that you guys could come out to support this talk and listen.
Hello everyone, it's nice to meet you, and it's great to be here. My name is Joyakgol, and also known as Dopehead Zo. I went by the name Dopehead Zo for more than 15 years, and so if you Google my name, Dopehead Zo is gonna come up with a lot of anarchist stuff. Actually, I wonder if you read this long email interview with me and this person, Gabriel Kun, and we had an interview about the history of Korean anarchism, and so if you read it, then it helps. I am currently on a tour of showing this documentary film about the Jeju Islanders' struggle against the construction of a naval base. This naval base is being constructed by the South Korean government and this large company, Samsung, but then it's going to be used by the US naval forces. And so the villagers and the islanders of Jeju Island, actually, Jeju Island is a small island of the south coast of South Korea. You cannot see it very well, but you can understand that it's located at a strategic point. If you have a large naval base, then you can, yeah, that's right there. You can project your military power to China, to Korea, to Japan. And so historically, this island of Jeju has been the target of foreign invasion or foreign forces. Anyway, when this word of showing this documentary film about the Jeju Islanders' struggle spread, the villagers and Jeju Islanders found out, and then they took up a collection and they sent me. So that's why I am here. And then I was chatting with Liz about social movement in South Korea, and then we talked about anarchism, and then she suggested I should have a lecture kind of thing, or just meeting with a lot of people, because people here would be interested in hearing more about what's going on in South Korea in terms of anarchist movement or radical social movement. Since I guess not many stuff about radical social movement or anarchist movement in South Korea is known to the other world, other than Asian countries like Japan or China or Taiwan, and so I guess this is why we have so many people here today, and so I'm really glad, and I really want to thank you again. And let's start with the history of anarchist movement in Korea. At the time, it was just one Korea before the division of South and North. So there are lots of books in Korean language as to when the idea of anarchism was first introduced to Korea. And some scholars or some professors say that it was late 19th century. It was around 1886 or 1889 at the time. Some of the Korean actually students studying abroad, like in Japan or European countries, learned about anarchism or anarchist movement, and then those students actually translated to Korean language, and so that's when Korean people first heard of anarchism. But then some other people said it wasn't the first introduction of anarchism to Korea. It was around 1910 when Japanese anarchists started translating all the Western anarchist works into Japanese language, and then many Korean people started translating from those Japanese language translation to Korean language, and then many people started read, what anarchism was about. So before the Japanese annexation to Korea, Korea had a long history of feudalism. It was Joseon dynasty, like king. Ruled the whole society, and it was like from 14th century till early 20th century, and then Japan became like one of the superpowers in the Asian region, and then it had this desire to eat up neighbor countries, and Korea became the first target. And so in 1910, Korea became the colony of Japan. And the Japanese imperial rule was really severe and ruthless, and it was really violent. So that condition actually made the Korean anarchism or Korean anarchism movement like nationalistic. You see, the goal of the Korean people's movement during 1910 till 1945, when Korea was liberated from Japanese colonial rule, it was just all about liberation and self-determination. Whether you're a socialist or whether you're a communist or nationalist or anarchist, the goal was like similar, liberation from Japanese colonial rule and achieve self-determination. But how you can achieve that goal? And the answer to that question, differed. If you were a nationalist, their goal was to, liberate Korea from Japan, but then they concentrated their energy to like diplomatical way or education or things like that. And then socialists, they mostly resorted to people's uprising, I guess. So they focused on like organizing, people, and then I guess anarchists focus on like direct action kind of stuff to like scare those Japanese rulers of the Korea or anyway. So that's the just basic distinction of those three different currents of Korean liberation movement. And when the first uprising by the Korean people was the March 1st movement in 1919. So it was about 10 years after Japanese annexation of Korea. Like all throughout the Korean peninsula, people like, rose up and they said, we want freedom, we want liberation from Japan. And it was a massive people's demonstration, and it lasted several months all over Korea. And before that incident, or before that March 1st uprising, not many revolutionaries or anarchists or so-called movement leaders believed in the power of people. But then after they saw that people could actually do this revolt and, actually shock the world, they were influenced by the power of the people. And then from there, people developed different ideologies. And it was the anarchists who, influenced by the People's Uprising in 1919, and they put the belief in the people. And so later, during the 1920s, most anarchists actually believe in the power of people, and it can come from direct action. And so lots of strategies were discussed. And let's see, can you show us the next picture? This guy or this person is a very interesting person. And if you know a little bit about Korean history or modern history, this person's name is Shin Chae-ho. And he is a very famous Korean nationalist, and he's from a noble family. He was a born aristocrat. His family was long time, high-ranking class in the Joseon dynasty. And so he was very bright person, and he was very respected person too. And when he knew, or he realized, or this Japanese occupation of Korea started, he and other people, anarchist people, fled to China or Manchuria at that time, and then they started traveling all over China to wage independent movement, because they couldn't do it inside Korea. You see, this colonial rule was really harsh. Any kind of subversive movement was oppressed by the Japanese government. Like in the 1930s and 1940s, we couldn't even allow to speak Korean language. We had to change our names into Japanese names, and it's like assimilation. So we were forced to be assimilated into the Japanese society. And from the beginning of the Japanese rule, it was like that. And so him and other anarchists, had to flee to Manchuria, and then from there they made resistance bases all over. Like, for example, they established military academy stuff, because they, at that time, they believed in direct action, and they wanted to actually wage war against Japanese imperialists. And then they really wanted to win. And so, can you show us the next picture? Yeah, his name is Lee Hye-young, and he's also very respected nobleman. And then he sold out all his property, whole lot of money, like millions of dollars. And then he and his whole family fled to Manchuria, the northern part of China. And then he and other friends, Korean anarchist friends, did a lot of anarchist organizing or direct action. Direct action means at the time is like bombing the Japanese police headquarters, or assassin, key Japanese rulers or Japanese collaborators. And so they did that kind of thing. But Lee Hye-young and Shin Chae-ho, those people were very respected person, and then they funded many different anarchist movement, and so like young people. Actually, Yu Hae-young was 66 years old when he fled to Manchuria and studied this anarchist action to achieve independence from Japan. It was around 1910, and then they spent most of the years of 1910s in like making material bases all over China. And actually, many people, I think, know that after 1945, Korea was divided into North Korea and South Korea, and those nationalists, people who took nationalist approach to gain independence from Japanese colonial rule became the South Korea, and then the socialist or the communist approach to gain independence went to the north, and they become North Korea. And then anarchists. You had like many anarchists at the time during the whole Japanese, colonial times. Where should you go? Where would you go? There were no like middle, in between north and south. There was just this 38 parallel, this line, heavily fortified, demilitarized zone, and so it was very interesting point why after 1945 all the Korean anarchists became more and more nationalistic. They chose South Korea. Why? Because they hated the communist rule. And the reason why they hated communist rule is that before the Russian Revolution in 1917, actually Korean anarchists and Korean communists were really close, because they believe in the same thing, anti-capitalist rule or oppression from anything. So they shared this similar vision, and so they were really close. But then some Koreans or some anarchists actually went to Russia to see what was the Russian Revolution was all about, how those communist Russia looked like, and how Russia treated its people after it became Soviet Union. And then those anarchists experienced like harsh backlash from the Soviet Union's rulers, I guess, because from 1917 to like 1920s, there were like kind of a civil war in Russia too. Capitalists tried to fight back, and they tried to topple this Soviet Union government. Anyway, so at that time, the Soviet government was really repressive, and as you know about this, the peasants uprising in different Soviet cities, and soldiers uprising in what city? St. Petersburg, and they were all like brutally suppressed, and many of them were killed by the Soviet Union army, and so they were like disillusioned with the Soviet Union. And then in the independent movement, inside the independent movement, like I said, there were like 3 different sectors, and then internal, power struggle between the communists and the anarchists was strong. It got, stronger and stronger, and so in 1920s, in Korea, the Korean anarchists were like actually doing a lot of things together with communists, but then in 1930s they didn't work together with the communists anymore, because some communists tried to kill anarchist movement, because anarchist movement were getting bigger and bigger, and so communists were afraid of anarchists, getting bigger and taking over the power and that stuff. Even though anarchists actually were not interested in taking over the power, all the anarchists actually cared about was just to strengthen the Korean people and achieve independence. But sadly, the communists didn't see it that way. And so there were lots of internal dispute, and then Korean anarchists and the communists became enemies. And so those are nationalists. They were really oppressive too. But then during the Japanese colonial rule, the goal was similar, to achieve independence, and then we didn't know how those nationalists would rule Korea, and so I guess the anarchists chose South right after the liberation from Japan, and then Korea was divided. Of course, many people, including communists, anarchists, and nationalists, try to gain unification, because Korea didn't want to get separated. It was separated by the foreign superpowers like Russia and the United States. They believe that the United States and Russia thought that Korean people were weak. It was just, a newborn country. And people didn't know about democracy. That's what they thought. Korean people couldn't govern themselves, and so for some time being, these outsiders should teach them, govern them, and so the country was divided. Anyway, so there was a big debate where anarchists should go, and then there was this general meeting or general association of all Korean anarchists in 1946, and at that meeting was held at a small southern city of Korean Peninsula. And then decided to go to the South and then join the nationalists. It was the beginning of tragedy. And this photo is a group of Korean independent militants who did a lot of violent way of things like killing Japanese people. They were called Uyoldan, and mostly they were based in Shanghai. And in 1920s and 1930s, actually, many Japanese people afraid of those Uyoldan members, because you can see those Hollywood-style movies about them. There are some mainstream movies in Korea, and then, title is like anarchist in the 1920s and 30s. They all look like that. But not every anarchist were supporting this kind of, stuff. It's very interesting. Many anarchists actually worked on farming or education too. And then after 1946, that all of them chose to go to the South. Actually, they started making farming communes throughout the South Korea, and developed education facilities, like alternative schools. And so they focused on that kind of thing, because right after the separation of Korea, the Korean War broke out, and many people died. How many? More than 6 million people actually died during the whole Korean War. And before the Korean War, on Jeju Island, like 30,000 people were killed by the U.S. military's government, and then it was the Korean police and constabulary. It wasn't the official military, but then it was this self-armed groups, and then they became the South Korean military in 1948. Anyway, the massacre were committed, and then many people died. And then after the Korean War, the situation became really, really severe, and no other criticism against the government was allowed in South or North. It was the same situation, which lasted for like 30, 40, 50 years. It was like similar dictatorship in the South and in the North too. And so and literally anarchists just couldn't continue what they believed in. They wanted to, do more like revolutionary kind of thing, but even they like start talking about it, they were like sent to prison, and they would just disappear, like, the KCIA was really strong, and then, like you don't want to fight against the government because it was, dark ages. And so from like Korean War, 1950s and 1960s and 1970s, there were no virtual anarchist movement in South Korea. I don't know about North Korea because I guess no anarchists existed in North Korea either, because most anarchists chose to stay in the South, and then the North became the communist rule. And I assume that the political situation was similar, and which was almost impossible to continue your subversive ideology or actions against the status quo. And so, like almost until 1980, like you couldn't hear anything about anarchism. So the strategy that South Korean anarchists used was to change their name. When I first became an anarchist, it was 1990s, and I met a lot of surviving old, the first generation of Korean anarchists. They were all men, like grandfathers, kind of all in their 70s and 80s. They talked to me like interesting stuff, like how they were doing in the 1960s and changes, 60s and 70s, how they had to change their identity into a self-reliant person, or how, anyway, they had to name their ideology into something new, so that like the government people or the oppressors cannot actually know what they were all about. And so they had to spend a long time undercover, as an undercover Korean movement. So like I said, they were like doing a lot of farming things and education things, but then they couldn't teach the essence of anarchism. The famous Western anarchist books like Kropotkin, and Bakunin, Tolstoy, they were all translated into Korean in 1920s and 1930s, and those books were totally banned. And like 1950s, 1960s, we couldn't read those books anymore. So it was like a total rupture. So there was no continuity in Korean anarchism. One thing that we envy about the Japanese anarchist movement is that they didn't experience this kind of cutoff. Like when the first Japanese came about, like in 1910s, the anarchist movement continued in Japan. So you can say, like you can hear a lot and you can learn from those previous generation. But then in Korea, when I started anarchist movement in 1990s, there were like nothing. Later, I studied myself. I did a lot of organizing. I did many anarchist stuff, and then little by little, I understood how it was, in 1920s and 1930s and 1940s. But then nobody could actually, taught me or told me, how the Korean anarchist movement was like in the past. And so it was not like a, first-hand experience. And some of the scholars who actually study anarchism argue that Korean anarchism movement has not cut off. Actually, it continued from the birth and until today. And so some of them says that Korea has like 100 years of anarchist movement, but the way I see it is not correct. And after like 1930s and 40s, the second generation of Korean anarchists who were active in the 1940s until like 1970s and 80s, they had this they inherited this legacy from the first generation of Korean anarchists. It was characteristics of Korean anarchist movement. Most of them were men. Most of them were from like noble family. They were like aristocrats, and they were sympathetic to nationalism. They were like three major characteristics of Korean anarchist movement in the past. And so in like 1990s and like the 2000s, we still, some of the anarchists have this tendency, like nationalist tendency, or like, men, or like educated, wealthy people. I guess, it has to do with the history of Korean anarchists in the 1920s. But actually, if I criticize that the Korean anarchist movement in the past was like that, not many people would want to acknowledge it. But anyway, so during the whole military dictatorship in South Korea in 1960s and 70s and 80s, no actual radical social movement existed. It was like era of silence and oppression, and no social movement existed. And then in 1990s, there started several Korean anarchists or individuals. I can tell because during 1996, next picture. In 1996, I remember the internet was first introduced to Korean society, and then I created this website, and then I did a lot of searching on the internet, and then at the time I was learning about anarchism, and I was fascinated by the word of anarchism. And then as I learned and studied a lot, later I realized that I was close to anarchism as opposed to other leftist ideologies, right? This guy is a very interesting person. He was born in 1923, and why do you laugh? I don't understand. He was born in South Korea, and then he was a self-taught communist, real hardcore communist. He learned or he read, according to him, every works by like Lenin and Marx and Engels and everyone. He almost memorized everything. Can you believe that? And during the Korean War, well, he started organizing this Communist People's Committee in Seoul. He was one of the cells who did a lot of organizing work in Seoul. Really interesting story. And then, during the Korean War, he fought, with the North against the South. And then after the war, he stayed in the South as an undercover spy. And then for about, I guess, 6 or 7 years, he was lurking around in South Korean society trying to, subvert the system. But then he was caught by the CIA, and then he went to prison for 15 years. So-called these long-term political prisoners in the South. There are tons of them, like him. And then they all refused to convert their ideology into capitalism, or they refused to convert to change their ideology or give up their belief. South Korean government or the KCI, they all this made this false promises to the prisoners, if you give up your ideology, then you can get released right away. So just sign this paper. I'm not going to do any more subversive work. And then he could have been released earlier, but then, just every other political long-term prisoners, he refused to sign that. And then, before he went to the prison, he knew that the day would come, getting arrested and spending a lot of time in prison. He said to me that he memorized all the work and all the books, so that in the prison you couldn't read anything, but you still have to remain a hardcore socialist. You have to memorize everything in your head so that you can think it over and over, and then you can remain as a communist. So that's how he endured this long time of imprisonment. But then, when he was in prison, he started studying really hard. Well, he went to the Seoul National University, one of the top universities in South Korea. And I guess he was a very intelligent person at that time too. It was 1970s and 1980s. The Korean society became industrialized, and then we would witness a lot of environmental problems and a lot of social problems, like military dictatorship, like democracy, that kind of thing. And then he was able to read a lot of stuff after spending 10 years in prison. And then little by little, he didn't tell anybody about this when he was still in the prison. But then he started having this thoughts: is communism really right? Is Soviet Union, the old dreams, all the beliefs that I had was really right? Is really right for the people? Is it really right for the oppressed people, or for the contaminated environment, or the industrialization, workers, lots of social problems were there, but he knew that capitalism wasn't the answer. But he contemplated a long time, is communism the answer to this whole problem of industrialization? And then he later said no, and then he started reading other books after he was released from prison, and then he spent most of the 1980s reading books, and then later he became a hardcore environmentalist, and then anti-nuclear activist. When he was in prison, and then he heard about the 3 Mile accident, and then after he was released, he heard about this Chernobyl incident in Soviet Union, and then he said that nor capitalism or communism was the answer. But then what's left? And for him, anarchism was the only answer. And so he learned a lot of anarchist stuff. And then he met a lot of Japanese anarchist survivors, because he was born in 1923, and then he went to school under the Japanese rule, and so he was able to speak and understand fluently Japanese language. And so he went to Japan many times in 1980s. There he met a lot of old surviving anarchists from 1920s and 30s, and then he exchanged a lot of discussions with older people, and then he finally believed that anarchism can show the answer to all the social problems that we have nowadays. And then he became more and more active in 1990s and in 2000, because in 1990s he had no friend in Korea who could understand his political stance. So he was one of the first group of persons who started environmental movement in South Korea, and it's a legend. But then later he tried to tell those environmental activists about his anarchism, but then in 1980s and 1990s people didn't want to hear about anarchism from him. And then, I met him, and then we started talking about anarchism, and it was great. And so later he showed up at our demonstrations, and, you can see he's holding a sign, "No war." He always he would say that war is not the answer to, war is not the solution to any problem. When we did this anti-war protest in 2003, after the U.S. invaded Iraq, and then he translated a lot of great Japanese books into Korean in terms of anti-nuclear movement and anarchist movement. Through him, we got to hear the tradition of Japanese anarchist movement, and we met actually a lot of Japanese anarchist activists, and it was great. Yeah. Kim Won-sik. Kim Won-sik, yeah, or Won-sik Kim, yeah, W-O-N-S-I-K. That's his first name, and the last name is Kim, K-I-M. So, yeah, he translated more than 20 books, and then he had his own idea of anarchism or whatever, but then one day, I wouldn't know I was gonna say this. Ask him, why don't you write your own book? Why do you always translate other people's work? And he was able to write his own books, but then the KCIA was always there. Even after he was released from prison, always surveillance was there. And so he was very cautious about expressing his ideas, because, he can go back to prison anytime. Nobody knows if the KCIA decides to, send him back to prison, then, he can disappear. And so he was very cautious, but we know that he was a great anarchist. But anyway, he died last year. Yeah, when he was arrived, we did many demonstrations together, and actually he was the one who taught me that environmental activism and peace activism and anarchist activism are not the separated ones. They're all together, and if you go deep, it's all the same. And that's another, street protest that we were doing against this conscription system. Korea is South Korea. When I say Korea, it's all South Korea. I don't know much about North Korea. I guess you should know more because everything is blocked. Everything about North Korea is just blocked in South Korea. We cannot talk, we cannot meet, we cannot, have any information about North Korea. All the information and knowledge about North Korea we can get to here is from like the government sources, which is totally incorrect. And so I don't know much about North Korea anyway. So conscription or the compulsory, military service system is still in South Korea, and so I was drafted too. And those horrible experiences that I had in the military, like 2 years you train to kill, you train to hate North Korea. Like everything that you learn is how to like hate and kill North Korean people. And then, if you are not trained well, then you can get all the corporal punishment every day. Like it was really harsh. And so those like trauma that I had in the military made me what I am now. I hated this authoritarian structure. I hated this government or the state system that make you think like them, or like I have to become another authoritarian person to practice this militarism to my like junior like soldiers who were just younger than me, and I hated that. But then I had to like beat those young people because they were not trained well. I hated that, but I had to. And so after I was released from the military, I gave a lot of thoughts, and then it took me a long time to become an anarchist. But then around like in the late 1990s, finally I realized that maybe anarchism is the way that I should, continue throughout my life. And so I started this anti-conscription movement, and he was there, and you can see we would have the like banners and signs, and we go to the streets and collect signatures from the citizens. And then I couldn't do it when I was in my like early 20s. I didn't know that I could resist the conscription. At the time there were no conscientious objection to military service movement. And later, people started this movement, and so they openly said that I'm not going to the military, I'm not serving for the government, later I choose to go to prison. And then lots of young people actually still go to prison because the South Korean society is not allowing its citizens to have alternative service. And so it's a big human rights violation, but then South Korean government saying we are still at war with the North, and it's all lies. It just shows how militarized Korean society is. And so we have done a lot of anarchist action against this militarism, to how to break this militarism. So anyway, in like 1996 and 1997, I created many anarchist websites in Korean language with anarchist information. So when this internet thing first introduced to Korea, it was like a new world. It was like a whole new sphere where I could do a lot of interesting stuff. And then I searched it, anarchism, and then there were no anarchist material written in Korean. There were many material in English or other languages, but none in Korean. And so I started translating. Translation of all the stuff into Korean, and then I created several websites. And then this logo is about our non-Serbian website, which was targeting at anti-militarism. And we from there we spread out our anarchist actions into many social actions. In 1970s and 1980s, there were no anarchist movement existed, but then radical social movement became, it started. The people's movement started in 1970s to bring about radical changes into Korean society. And so in 1990s, it became really strong, in early 1990s. Well, in 1990, it joined with labor movement, and then in 1990, it joined with different people's movement and anarchist movement, the women's movement, a different kind of liberation movement joined, and then all the people's movement was really strong. And so in 1990s and 20s, when we started this anarchist movement, there was this big debate whether we take the path of only anarchist movement, or we join this big social movement and strengthen our power and radicalize the society. And so some of them, well, this is a little photo that we were doing right after 9/11. The U.S. invaded Afghanistan, and then I started this campaign. Please, don't invade Afghanistan. And so we started peace movement, and then you can see it's a critical mass movement in South Korea. So in Seoul, we have this critical mass movement where, massive group bicycle riding, we do it every month. And so we still do it. So if you are interested in, then come to, when you are in Seoul, bring out your bicycle and go to the Central Gwanghwamun Park in last Saturday of every month at 4 o'clock. Then you can join this group riding. It's one other thing that we do. And there were other anarchist things that we do. For example, there are so many, but guerrilla gardening kind of stuff, or food not bombs, or blood sisters thing. It's making alternative menstruation products, actually sewing menstruation pad, washable, reusable cotton pad. And it was a big, actually, movement in South Korea. You can see this photo workshop where participants actually are sewing the menstruation pad. Before that movement started, Korea is a very male-dominating society, and women, patriarchy is everywhere. And then, women cannot say menstruation. The word menstruation is like a taboo word. And so there was this menstruation festival where we celebrate, this visitor. Anyway, so we went a little bit further, and then, when you sew that, instead of buying disposable menstruation pad, it's bad for the environment, it's bad for your body, and it's only like making the corporation richer, and so let's stop, spending money on that, and let's do everything in a DIY way. And these blood sisters, or in Korean language, 피자매 연대. Yeah. Actually, yeah, it was a very strong movement from 2003 to 2012. Like it lasted 10 years, and then we gave more than 100 workshops everywhere. We would travel everywhere in Korea, teach them how to make, and then, it was really fun. If you want to know more about that, I can, tell you like hours and hours. You can see this, little kid is sewing. Actually, she was like 6 years old, but then, she knew how to sew, and so actually she made one at that day. And her mother is also sewing. And then when I started this movement, I didn't know how to sew, but then later I became an expert. And so I made like, more than hundreds of them. Like, it's a great gift item too. And people love it. It's like there is only one, menstruation pad that, you can, make it anyway. Yeah. Next picture. So, so virtually no anarchist movement existed until like 1980s, but then 1990s somehow, like as the Korean society became more democratized, but not at all. It's still a dictatorship, but then like we had to do our own thing, and this thing is graffiti or like artwork that we did on like squat buildings. Squat movement, it was there 2000s too. So many different kind of movement actually sprout. When I guess this liberal president Kim Dae-jung became the president in 1997. Like before that, it was just a military dictatorship, and then it was really oppressive. But Kim Dae-jung, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He had the talks with the North Kim Jong-il, and the general, atmosphere was like, okay, we have the freedom of speech, we have the, people's right, we can enjoy some of the human rights too, and then, many like alternative movements started, including anarchist movement, and so it was very active, very fun, and very spontaneous. So, when people ask me, because I was like one of the first anarchists after the whole thing in the 1990s. So like those journalists would often ask me, how many anarchists are there in Korea? How the hell can I know? But then on the internet, there were many anarchist individuals who identified themselves as anarchists. Not necessarily they didn't do like things out on the street, but then they started like identifying themselves as anarchists in the from the late 1990s, and in the 2000s there were so many. So I would say safe to say that there are more than 10,000 anarchists in South Korea. Yeah, and still I guess there are that many, but as a collective movement, it's not that strong. They're all like individuals scattered all around. I don't know. But if I go to Busan or the cities like Gwangju or Daejeon in Korea, I would meet up with those anarchists, like group of anarchists, like 10 people. And then we do like, like demonstrations together and different kind of actions together. And this is a little village in Pyeongtaek. Pyeongtaek is a big city south of Seoul, and actually farmers used to live inside this tiny village. About 500 farmers used to live in the village of Daechuri, and then suddenly Korean government announced this plan to relocate the Yongsan U.S. military base station in Seoul, downtown Seoul, down to this area. And so it was actually U.S. military's plan to expand that army base to consolidate all the scattered U.S. military bases into a big one in west coast of Korea. And so in 2004, these farmers started resisting against the expansion of the U.S. garrison. It was called Camp Humphreys. It's still there. The Camp Humphreys is the biggest military base in Northeast Asia. And then inside that military there will be like more than 20,000 soldiers. Anyway, so we moved down to the village, and the whole village was on the verge of like forceful displacement. You know, all the houses were like just, you know, leveled down, and then all the area was just disappear, and then U.S. military take over, and then, you know, they make a giant army base. But so to fight that, activists like me and many anarchists actually moved down to the village and started living there with the 500 villagers. And then that movement started from 2004 until 2007. Finally, we fought really hard to stop this military base expansion, but then we couldn't do it. We failed, and then we were like kicked out from the village. And this is a photo where we are building this observatory. That's what we called it, because it was actually higher than the photo. You look up to a higher point, and then you can see where the Korean government is sending the troops or the riot police or the thugs to take over or to destroy the houses. Actually, the Korean government started destroying those empty houses, and so I'm a very poor activist, you know. I'm a full-time activist, but then I don't do much like economic stuff to make money, right? And so like I live in a tiny house, you know. I pay monthly rent and that kind of stuff. But then when I moved down to the village, there were huge houses, empty houses everywhere, like 4 bedrooms, like 5 bedrooms. It was like my first time to use this whole giant house for myself. And so I was really happy to live in the village with all the like-minded people and the villagers who are fighting militarism. It was really great, and we had a lot of fun, like redecorating, like, you know, the whole house for yourself. Yeah. You can see that we like painted lots of slogans in the house, and yeah, well, empty house painters. And then you can see a series of photos how we meet and went to the village. Yeah, they're all anarchists. And then yeah, we go down to the village like that. So rice paddies everywhere, like endless farmland, but those farmers grow, you know, rice everywhere. And so actually she was taking us to one of the empty houses, and then we moved there. Yeah, this house is also empty, like abandoned farming vehicles everywhere. And then we started cleaning the house because it was abandoned or destroyed many months, and so it was all dirty and stuff. You know, people couldn't live, and so the first thing we would do is to clean the whole place and paint the whole house, walls, and the electricity was cut off, but then there were some experts who knew a lot about electricity, and so we stole electricity from the pole, and so we used electricity for free. And then water, in the middle we took some rest, and then they started dancing. It was fun. This was whole 2006. The farmers' resistance against the expansion of U.S. military started in 2004, and then this whole transforming the village into like a giant commune, squats, started in 2006, and so these people went down to the village and started living there with the original villagers. Yeah. We made songs, we released albums, we had numerous concerts every night. We made all the documentary films about the struggle, and as a matter of fact, we used the internet, and then we used the internet to broadcast every day, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of, I used to have a long hair, very long hair. I don't understand why I was taking this weird photos of people's food. You just, and then, this whole walls, repainted. And then the villagers loved this new decoration, and then they said, if you have a house and if you want to redecorate it, please use the paint and paint all the walls. That's how the mayor of the villagers said to us. Right. Yeah, so that was the farmers' struggle against the U.S. military, but then all the anarchists joined it, and then we transformed these empty houses into like squats. And so the government actually cut off the water supplies too. And so I made this compost toilet so that without water we could resist for 10 days. Because you have to walk a long way to get all the waters. That's actually one of the daily chores that you have to do, get water. And then I didn't want to waste water, and so I made this compost toilet, and it was really useful. When I first made this compost toilet, the villagers, they didn't like me. What are you doing, But then later they understood what it was and how useful it was and everything. You make a fertilizer. Nothing is, you don't throw away anything. And so it's like a natural recycle. And it was very ecological for us because we, we didn't have much resource to live there. And so everything has to be eco-friendly, not because we were wealthy, but we had to be. Okay. These are the cookies that we made, and so after the Pyeongtaek farmers' struggle, it was 2007 and 2008 in Korea. This new right-wing, super conservative party took the power, and then this new president, like George W. Bush kind of guy, he became the president of South Korea, and then this G8 summit was huge. In 2008, the president of South Korea, went to Japan to join this G8 summit meeting with George W. Bush and Japanese Prime Minister and stuff. And so we organized another big protest against the G8 summit, and it was one of the actions that we did in the summer of 2008. Actually, there is a very good documentary film about the Asian activists, and there were many anarchists from all around the world. They all went to this big city, Sapporo in Japan, and then they did a week of anti-globalization struggle. And so this documentary film made by Hong Kong media activists actually captures the struggle. Actually, I am one of the leading characters in the documentary film, so I suggest you watch it. It's on YouTube, and the title is Good Luck, Comrades. So you type YouTube, Good Luck, Comrades, then you can watch this whole film, 70 minutes. And that documentary film was popular in Hong Kong, Hong Kong's Human Rights Film Festival, Hong Kong's Independent Documentary Film Festival. The film was shown and won some awards. Yeah. And we made this cat cookies because G8, just pass it. G means rats in Korean, and so G8 means 8 rats. And so we organized this cat festival to catch those rats. You know, the leaders of the G8 countries are all rats. And so we made these cat cookies and then sold them. And so we were able to make a whole lot of money, enough money to send me to Japan and stay there for like 3 weeks. And so that's how I was able to participate in the anti-G8 summit struggle. It was really fun too. Oh my God, 2009, it was Yongsan struggle. It was a massacre. 5 activists were killed by Korean elite police forces, anti-terrorism unit. Like, what's the most elite police unit? SWAT team. Korean SWAT police was there, and then you can see those guy in the container. Actually, he's a Korean SWAT police team member, and then they were like cracking down on the forcefully evicted people's resistance. You know, eviction or anti-eviction is a big part of Korean social movement, and they are very radical because at many times those are big construction companies like Samsung and Hyundai, or like all the big companies in Korea are military industrial complex, and they do business in all areas, like making vehicles, like life insurance, like health business, and like construction business. And so anyway, they were there. And so these tenants, those poor people who had no place to live, you know, what they did is to make a resisting fortress, like made by like metal stuff, and then they continue their resistance inside the fortress for months, refused to leave the building that they, you know, were like forced to leave. And then like months later, the landowners or like big developing companies just give up and like, you know, they sign deals with the people. But then, so the forcefully evicted people knew that if they set up this resisting fortress and then if they succeeded in maintaining their resistance for like a couple of months or 3 months, then they could win the rights to continue their living in somewhere else, because the construction companies would pay you some money to you can live somewhere else. And so that's what those Yongsan evictee believed. And so they made this fortress on the rooftop of the building, and then they brought all the food and all the stuff that they could maintain inside the fortress. But then within 25 hours after completion of the fortress, the Korean government, the Lee Myung-bak administration, this brutal capitalist Nazi kind of guy, sent the SWAT team to forcefully crack down on the resistance, and then fire broke out. And then the people who were inside, there were like 30 or 40 of them, but then most of them fled out, but then 5 of the activists were killed. They were burned to death. We don't so far know exactly how they died, because one of the SWAT policemen also died in the fire, but right after those people died, the prosecutor's office did the autopsy of the dead people, and then they took the bodies to the hospital, and then for a long time the family members of those dead people didn't know where the bodies were. And then later they saw the bodies, and then the ankles were broken and the ribs were broken, and there were many like bruises and yeah, like scars. They were burned to death, but then we think that before they died, they severely were hit by those SWAT police, riot police. Yeah, popos. Crazy. And so, yeah, these are the like tall buildings that like Samsung construction company wanted to build on the rubbles of those small business buildings where those evictee used to run. Like among those 5 killed activists, one of them used to have like Japanese sushi restaurant in that area. One of them had just a little coffee shop. One of them had just a small like mom and pop store. And those people were killed because they wanted to continue their like business and life in the same area. But then the price of the land became so expensive after they built those like huge buildings nearby, so they couldn't just afford it, and so they started like resisting this forced eviction. But then it was so brutal, like from 2008, the whole Korean society is becoming like really backwards, and like it feels like living in a military dictatorship again. So many anarchists actually went to the area. It's in downtown Seoul, but then the whole area was like empty. But it wasn't empty because the area was filled with activists and the police, and the construction company hired thugs. And so they were like fight every day, and it was really traumatizing because we were hit, we were beat up by the police and the thugs. The thugs were scary. They were gangsters. They were like organized crime gangs, paid by the construction companies like Samsung. Samsung paid a whole lot of money to hire these organized gang members, and then they scare the just innocent people. If you continue your resistance, you get hurt. So just get out of the area. But we were there together with all different kind of people, like progress people, all different kind of progress people actually moved to Yongsan area, and then this whole building we squatted this building, and we made that our headquarters. And then I made this all guerrilla gardening kind of stuff everywhere, because this whole Yongsan area, those thugs or the police spray painted like knives, or people with like no head or bleeding, or like skeletons, to make look scary. But then I planted all those plants, eggplants. You can see the peppers and the cucumbers and the lettuce. So actually, the forcefully evicted people were really happy to see something grow in those hostile atmosphere. And then we saw this exciting video on YouTube where like Western activists were breaking the asphalt and then like transfer that area into a garden. And so that's what we actually did. I mean, there is a movie that like this, we break the whole concrete ground, and then we pour all the dirt on it, and then we transform that area into a whole like garden. It was really fun. But then like several days later, the thugs came, and then the whole plants died. But we continued. And so instead of like making like real gardens, we used this styrofoam boxes, so that if the thugs come, we can move those gardens into different locations. It was guerrilla gardening. And then this struggle continued. The anti-eviction struggle continued in 2010 and 2011. This is a Turiban struggle. And the forceful eviction was so common. Like today, this similar thing is actually happening. Small business owners or just rent payers couldn't pay rent because the land price goes up, and then the landowners make you pay like double the amount of monthly rent all of a sudden. Like tomorrow they call you and, hey, you have to pay $3,000 a month. How can you pay it? And then like within a month, the thugs come and then destroy everything. In this case, they used to have a Korean kalguksu restaurant at the first floor of that building, and then second floor, third floor were different. But then the small business owners of the second floor and third floor were really scared when they saw those thugs, and then they actually fled, escaped, without getting any money from the landowners. But then the restaurant owner on the first floor, when she was kicked out, the next day she went back to the place by breaking the metal fences. And then she started the struggle. It was the Christmas Eve of 2009, when we were still in Yongsan struggle. We heard that news. Another different resistance started, and then we squat the whole building, the three-story and the basement building, and then we used the whole area into a like punk rock concert hall. And so all the punk rockers actually came to that place, and then like 3-4 times a week we have punk rock shows and film screenings and events like this. And so we used to have like anarchist info shop in several places, but then this Turiban building was something like anarchist info shop, or something like this building. But it was illegal for us to use that building, so we were always on the threat from the developing company. But so we lived there 24 hours, 7 days a week, because we didn't know when those developers come with the force, the thugs, scary people with all the tattoos and yeah. Yeah, tattoo is, it has a different meaning in Korean culture. Right? Yeah, it's a scary thing. So this is an aerial photo of the place. So you can see other places were already destroyed, and then we actually were able to stop the destruction of the building because we went in and stayed there for 1.5 years. So after like 540 days, we could win. It was actually the first time that those anti-eviction activists win a major victory, because yeah, the landowners finally gave up and paid all the money so that those two couple, the owners of the Korean restaurant, were able to open another same or better new restaurant nearby in Hongdae area. If you go to Seoul and Hongdae area, and then please go there. And you know Joyakgol or dopehead, so you can have free food. I can guarantee you that. They all love me. Yeah. So yeah, at the Duriban Squad building, we organize all different kind of exciting events. You know, like 3-4 times a week. And this web flyer is anti-nuclear concert that we organized at April 3rd, 2011, right after the Fukushima, right? The nuclear plant collapsed, and then like radiation was all over, and so like anti-nuclear activism, was a big part of this. Anti-eviction struggle. It was really interesting. All those different like currents of social struggle met once we create this like place. People like us need a place to maintain your struggle, right? You need a place to meet people. You need a place to like have events like this. And so we used that place for more than 1.5 years, and it was a great struggle. And then, yeah, just like that, we made this garden. It was all like, rubbles, and then we took everything away, and then, actually it was a very painstaking job. It took me like several months to make those like soil, like fertile, so that things can grow. Later we could grow like radish and cabbage, and then and then other vegetables we ate together. It was really fun and happy. Yeah, wow, it can go wrong, and I mean, it takes so long. But I don't know. I still have so many stuff to talk about. Just for example, like Hope Bus thing. To stand in solidarity with the laid-off workers. In port city of Busan, there were many shipbuilding workers were laid off in like massive numbers, like 3,000 of them were laid off. And so they started this resistance to get their jobs back. And then this courageous women worker went all the way up to the high crane, and then she stayed there for like 300 days. She didn't, go down. She stayed there, and then since the crane was sealed off, no police or the thugs could go up to take her down, and so we organized this big social rally. Like in Seoul and Busan, since Busan is like 5 hours away from Seoul, and so we organized those Hope buses. So it was a very horizontal way of organizing. No one like tells us how to, like organize a bus. So like people like me or people like her, like everyone, spread the story, and we choose a date. And then in one bus, about 40 people can get on board. And so like there were more than 100 buses organized to go to the city of Busan, and we stay inside the ship yard, and it was a big pressure on the company and the Korean government too. Korean government was always, behind this, labor oppression. Labor movement has been always strong and powerful since the 1970s, and so Korean government did many things to, oppress the labor movement, and so we were there together with them. Yep. And this is May Day general strike. Strike on May Day. So we do street protests and rallies on every May Day. This is a slot walk that we did in. Oh yeah, question.
I had a quick question. For the person that was in occupying a crane for 300 days, how did they get food? Because traditionally the cops will try to cut them off with food. How did they survive up there for that long?
So surviving and communicating were the two most important things, and so the cops actually occupy the ground, but then they allowed to send food up to her, or sometimes they didn't. So a whole week she was starving, and then all the human rights activists went there. It's so humane, cruel thing to stop giving off food. And so actually every day she long rope, long rope, and so we tie the food, plastic bag, and then we give her the signal, and then she just pull the rope, and then she gets the food, and then there is no toilet, and there is no running water for shower or anything, and so it was really hard. But if you really committed to it, there were ways. So I don't want to get too personal, but Kim Jin-suk. Was this name. Al Jazeera people actually made a very moving documentary news about her struggle several times. And BBC also made some documentary films about the struggle too. This is slot walk that we did in 2011 and 2012. Many anarchists were female activists or this LGBT activists joined in the slot walk too. And so it was another watershed moment for Korean social movement where feminists and anarchists and LGBT activists joined together for this slot walk. And this is the struggle against the naval base on Jeju Island. I said something in the beginning, and this is a peace movement, and I have been living there since 2011 when every other social struggle was finished. Well, as I am living there, I sometimes go to the mainland Korea and join the other struggle, and then come down to the village of Gangjong, where the Korean government and Samsung again is building this giant naval base to host this U.S. pivot to Asia thing. And so this island of peace with incredibly beautiful environment with all the endangered species, the dolphins, the crabs, all the crystal clear water. It's all like contaminated and destroyed, and it's dying. And do we need this giant naval base when Korea has already many naval bases, and there is no direct threat from North Korea? We all know that. Why do we need a naval base? Because U.S. is sending its naval might into Asia Pacific, and so they need another naval base. When Obama actually announced its plan, pivot to Asia, actually the Congress asked Obama, so how are you gonna pay for it? How are you gonna, do we have enough money to build a naval base? Actually building that naval base for like aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines cost $1 billion. And the answer that Obama said to the Congress was, we're going to use our allies' naval bases, or we're going to have allies build naval bases for us. And this is one of them. Crazy. And the people on the island actually suffer the most because of this naval base construction plan. And so this is another village where young people or activists or anarchists move down and then live there to create this like alternative commune. And we have this large number of people supporting the naval base construction. I mean, they are supporting the peace movement against the naval base construction project. And so actually some of the people here have been to this island to support the Korean farmers and fishermen and people's struggle against the naval base. It is still continuing for 7 years. Okay, yeah. I can go actually like many hours and hours, but then, and time is almost up, and there are, I'm sure, many questions about this. I'm like really, glad to answer any question that I can. So it's almost 9 o'clock, so any questions? It's supposed to be Q&A. It's supposed to be an hour of lecture and then an hour of Q&A. I said too much.
I have a kind of sentimental question. It seems like you and your friends and comrades have experienced like a lot of repression and things that you call failures. And I just wonder like how you go on or what, like, I don't know. Yeah, just like how do you go on after experiencing that so intensely? Because you seem very like, oh, it was very fun and happy, and I love it.
Yeah, it's like many times it's hard, but I get support from a lot of people. They don't necessarily like support you directly, but then they show their support in many different ways, and they like help us like everywhere we go. For example, this Jeju Islanders struggle against the naval base. Actually, not many people move to the village live with the villagers together, but like around the whole peninsula, people support us. That's the thing that keeps us going. We know that what we are doing is right. It's justice for, it's a struggle for social justice and peace and environment. And so we can keep going as long as we don't get burned out.
Can you say something about the endangered species and the struggle for the animal freedom? Something specific. I'd like read one.
Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphin is one species that's in danger because of the naval base project. there are about 114 population left in the whole entire Korean seas. This rare dolphin only live in Jeju Island in Korea. Well, they live in Japan and like India and like southern Asian seas too. But in Korea, only Jeju Island, we have this Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins, and they are so great. But then this naval base construction destroying the habitat of the dolphins, and so they used to come to the village like every week. The villagers testified that they could see those dolphins every week, but then ever since the naval base project started, the dolphins don't come ever. And so it's very sad, but then once we stop this construction, then we know that they will come back. And then, you know, like freshwater shrimp that's only found in Jeju Island, and narrow-mouthed frogs, and red-foot crab. They are some of the endangered species that should be protected, but they all actually dead. Most of them are dead. So we don't know how we can do this, but it's an environmental disaster in that sense.
Folks from Korea who are in the state communist tradition who have argued that the historical anarchists in the 1920s, 1910s, 1930s, and then the resistance movements, the burning of the land registries, etc., after the end of the World War II, they said that they were not anarchists whatsoever, and that it's so silly to call them anarchists, and it's you know, things that they said they had no contact. And I was like, well, I've read their papers translated. I know that they. But so my question is, what is that seems really disconnected. What is the interaction between the anarchists in Korea today and the more state communists or the folks who have more authoritarian leftist perspectives?
I didn't get the
okay.
last part.
It's South Korea. It's South Korea.
Like
the labor movement.
Yeah.
What is the level of interaction? What does that look like? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. Actually, there is this interesting part that I want to say about those Korean anarchists during the 1910s and 1930s. Actually, as many of you know, there are many different currents of anarchism in the world. But then Peter Kropotkin's anarchism, which he described mutual aid is the driving force of anarchism as opposed to like competition, right? And social Darwinism was like so spread all over in Japan and Korea. Actually, those Korean anarchists believed that it was the social Darwinism who made those Japan conquer like Korea and China, because according to the social Darwinism, you have to like get stronger and you have to win all the competition by killing the weak or the weaker. And so it wasn't just the animal, but in human society, the same principle can be applied to. That's what social Darwinism was all about. And then this Peter Kropotkin's books, like challenges this social Darwinism very, very effectively than other anarchist books. And so most or all Korean anarchists were deeply influenced by the Kropotkin, and then it was what they were doing was incredible. And then these days, Marxists and anarchists, we sometimes do things together in issues like this, labor movement, or this president, newly elected president, the whole presidential campaign was illegal because they used state apparatus illegally. Like KCIA was used to influence people's decision. The police was used. The military cyber warfare unit was created to like meddle with the results of the election. And so it was all like a fraud. And so throughout the whole year of 2013 and up to now, like we do a lot of demonstration together. But then we need to like have a like big demonstration. And so in Korea, many different groups like anarchist, socialists, or like civil society, you know, people, and like not like radical people, they all like come together for this, you know, demonstration to, you know, demand the step down of the president. But like, you know, in like other cases, we do things separately. Yeah.
When I read about Korean history, there's often like the sense that in 1987, this moment where there's a really massive wave of sort of spontaneous strikes in the South, kind of also relating to like a really radical student movement and the taking down the dictatorship in that time. I'm just wondering what role, I guess on the one hand, I'm wondering what role anarchists, if there were anarchists in that. You kind of talk about anarchism emerging in the 90s, so I'm kind of wondering what the relationship was to these earlier kind of worker, student movements in the late 80s, if that, there was just
no, or not many anarchists were there. There could be like several individual anarchists or many individual anarchists, but then they didn't like have any like anarchist action in the name of like anarchy or anarchism or things like that. So there were many like radical like students and activists were there. And then in like 1987, when like students were killed, when you know they were one of them were tortured to death, and then the other one was like shot. The tear gas. He was shot the tear gas in the head or something, and then he died at the demonstration. And then this big protest broke out all over, and then you know the ruling party presidential candidate apologized, and then you know the constitution changed, and then some democratic measures were introduced. But yeah, and then later, like whole general strike was all over Korea. But then not many anarchists were there at the time. Like those anarchists were there at the time were so-called traditional anarchists who had like tied with the past, who were like like scholars, who were like like old people. They were all like in their 60s at the time. The one big thing that they did throughout the whole 1980s, those traditional anarchists, was to have a very big international conference about anarchism in Korea that took place in 1988. Those second generation anarchists, like some of them became like college professors, or like they were like politicians. So they became like really weird. Like after they spent so much time in like education and farming, some of them became like politicians, and they make a political party. But then none of them were elected. But then derailed from the anarchist stream, I guess.
So, from your relationship with Kim Won-shik, did he ever talk about any mutual aid societies he was a part of outside of the peninsula, or anyone he worked with in the first generation of anarchists who left the peninsula to form autonomous kind of communities like in Manchuria or anything like that? Because I've read about them, but it's never a primary source or never anyone's direct experience, and it feels a little bit like romanticized. And then the whole relationship they had to the Red Army and Soviet, it just feels like there's a huge chunk of history there that's missing. And I wonder if that person, if you've met any survivors of that era who shared with you that experience?
I met many Japanese anarchists who had like strong ties with the first generation of anarchist movement, like which was really popular in the whole East Asia in 1910s and 1920s, 1930s. But like Korean anarchists or Chinese anarchists, they all disappeared. Like those who fled to Manchuria, you know, like those autonomous villages, like in many, many places, they all disappeared after, you know, Communist Party took over China, and then North Korea, and then South Korea became so like oppressed. Those anarchists couldn't, you know, like continue their identity, and in order for them to survive, they had to like change their, you know, names or practices or identities. So after like 1945, we don't get to hear anything. You know, no China, no North Korea, no South Korea anarchists existed after that. Like small number of South Korean anarchists like continued, but then can we really say that they continue the anarchist practices? I don't know, but then, you know, they did inside their heart. But like, you know, it was a sad period and harsh times for them.
You mentioned a lot like the role of translated text in the several decades when there were any anarchists in Korea or like active. Like, do you view anarchism in Korea as essentially a Western import, or does it grow out of other? Do you see it as growing out of other aspects of Korean society, or like something different? Like, for example, some like reaction to modern forms of state control.
That's a very interesting question too. And then actually I gave a lot of thoughts about it too. Interesting thing is we have this urge to do things on my way, like spontaneous way of, you know, doing things while not oppressing other people. Like, you know, we are all like equal, you know, horizontally, right? And like our goal is to abolish all like authority and hierarchy, that kind of stuff. It's like nobody taught me. It was I was like comfortable with those things, and then later I read all those books about this, like, and then I found it really fascinating. Wow, you know, like I was really surprised to know that like these like-minded people existed like several hundred years ago, like in 1800s, and so at that point you become like more. You can be sure about like your anarchism. You know, it's not just you receive influence from Western. It's like, I think it's a mix of like influence from outside and then your like own tendency. And under certain social circumstances, it can grow really fast. Especially like during the Japanese colonial war, when it was so oppressive and people needed like new like ideological weapon, and then this anarchist idea gave them like ideological liberation by saying that you know we can defeat social Darwinism by adopting anarchism. Like they had this big thirst how to like theorize my thoughts, and then when they hear about it, then it was easier for them to identify themselves.
I wanted to answer your question a little bit from a historical perspective. Probably the earliest form of anarchism in Asia comes out of Taoism, which is fundamentally opposed to the state, fundamental belief in spontaneity, and a fundamental opposition to any kind of authority. And that strain of Taoism comes down into Korean philosophy and history through the Neo-Confucianisms. And that combines with a general communitarian philosophy and collective philosophy of Korean society, which is very, very, it's a kind of indigenous anarchism. But at the same time, the counter threat or the counter force to that is traditional fundamentalist Confucianism, which is very, very hierarchical and very, very embedded in the state. So much so that the Korean language is one of the most hierarchical languages on the planet, and it's impossible to speak to somebody without establishing a relationship of power, which is why Joe and I are both Koreans, but it's actually more comfortable for me to speak to him in English than it is to speak to him in Korean, because once we start speaking Korean, there's automatically a kind of a jockeying for power.
That's correct, sir.
Is it okay if we see a couple more questions?
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, by the way. This is really amazing. I had kind of like, I had a lot of questions, but one important question I think was, what was the strategy of attack with the early anarchists in during that war against the Japanese? What was the strategy of attack from the nationalist Koreans versus the anarchist Koreans? Did the anarchists only attack the Japanese hierarchy, and did the nationalists attack common Japanese people? And was that a difference in strategy? And so I have that question, and then also I would just like to know more about accountability structures within the Korean anarchist movement, and mediation, and how you would deal with infiltrators within your movement, from the government.
So the first question is really interesting too. Most or every Korean anarchist during the Japanese colonial rule targeted at the emperor. Japanese emperor. It was really interesting. Well, while the nationalists and anarchists and communists shared some similar goal, but then it was the only anarchists who targeted the emperor system, and so that's why some of them tried to kill the emperor by themselves. So that was the reason why anarchists adopted this, so-called terrorism. It's not terrorism per se, but anyway. And then anarchists also spend a lot of resources and energy into building militants or soldiers who can actually fight against Japanese forces. And so they built many military academies in Manchuria. While the nationalist Korean who had nationalist approach to getting national independence was to build internal power or strong power or educate people or solve those problems diplomatically or resorting to the United States or the UK, the superpowers, and then convince them that it's so wrong to, colonize small countries like Korea. And so they use the kind of peaceful way, but then anarchists believed that those nationalistic approach were like, useless, or, it didn't believe the power of the people, or, so they didn't like each other. And then second question, how we deal with those infiltrators. Internal conflicts. I don't know if we have like serious internal conflicts, then we go separate ways. Let's see. I don't know. It's always a problem how to deal with these internal conflicts. I wasn't really good at solving those internal conflicts, and there were many problems. And so I know that many anarchists actually stopped participating in those actions that we do because of that problem. But honestly, I don't know how to like solve those problems when it gets really heated and stuff. But one other way of solving the problem is just continue what you are doing. So it's like, let's bury the hatchet and like, start doing things together later. Any other